who's doing really well with that?
Sure.
Yes, go ahead.
Leah Voorhees, Deputy Superintendent. So yes, our attendance support team, which consists of 3 people, they have a work group that they receive national technical assistance from national technical assistance provider, and they are trying to support all LEAs with like universal supports. And receiving feedback from all LEAs, and then they're working intensely with some LEAs. Park City, I don't know specifically, but I will find out for you.
Do you want to come up and speak? Yeah, please introduce yourself when you do. So.
Hi. My name is Garrett Russell. I'm one and a half attendance specialists here. Yes, we do have a year-long attendance cohort. We are onboarding right now, and Park City did sign up to join the cohort. It's kind of, we call it the coalition of the willing, because there's not really like a mandate that they have to engage with us, but they're identified by their previous year's chronic absenteeism rates, or we also just allow them to reach out. We do bi-monthly webinars, we have monthly newsletters as well, and so people find out about what we're working on, and if they want to sign up, they can join the cohort. We front load it through the summer, so a lot of it's going to be attendance systems, teaming, stakeholder engagement, starting out with the September Attendance Awareness Month campaign, and then we move into the year and look at some other like aspects that they can actually address while kids are in the building. So it's a lot easier to front load it over the summer and develop that system. This will be our 4th year of the cohort. We have 26 members that have stayed on over the last 3 years, and so each year it's actually doubled. This year we're expecting it to be around like 10 to 15 more participants as well.
I do have a question. Are those primarily district schools, or are they a mix of charter and district?
So it is a mix. So we do have full districts that are going. That's kind of like our preferred method. But we also just have individual schools that have reached out because they wanted more support that they weren't getting from the district. And then we have, I'd say, about half charters as well, which is awesome.
So a good mix then.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, very good. So I guess if a school wanted to just reach out and get additional resources or be part of the narrative here, they could just do that on their own, or the district could. And I guess it would be a preference because it would be a systemic.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, especially when you're like building up all the elementaries in the district can have the same practices with some different leeways here and there. Same with the junior highs and the high schools, but yeah, it's kind of nice when the district comes in and then you get that top-down support. Similar with our campaign, we want to be able to support at the state level, to push down to the district, and then school level as well.
Go ahead.
This may be crazy. I'm just wondering if there's any way to partner with like Ski Utah with industry and reward secondary student, like honor roll students, and give some incentive. I just wonder if they'd be willing to partner and do anything with season passes for honor roll students at a discount or something that, I don't know, might help incentivize them to stay in school with a really expensive and really fun, popular sport in Utah.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking my language. I'm a skier, so I love the idea. I think like as we continue pushing our attendance campaign forward, we'll be able to develop more community partners. That is like the number one thing we see from our national partners that's changing attendance is what community partners do you have? Who are you reaching out? And it could be incentives. It could also be reaching out to different demographic groups and getting representation that way. I think that's an awesome idea.
I think golf courses
I personally don't have the
maybe too,
contact,
like
but if
summer,
you can connect us, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm not sure who.
Yeah, and I think the other barrier is like making sure they have equipment, things like that, because some students could be on the honor roll, but then don't have access to getting equipment to be able to get up on the hill as well.
That's true. Okay.
But yeah, I think any of those ideas would be fantastic.
And using those days to miss school to go ski. That's what I see a little bit of. A weekend pass, there you go. Yeah. Go ahead.
So our student advisory committee did a video with some recommendations for the board, and one of them was regarding a youth kind of a campaign. We're engaging youth in the attendance campaign, talking to kids about why it's important to go to school. Have you been reached out to about that? Is that something you'd be interested in
We'd definitely be interested in student voice. We do have a couple members from the Student Advisory Council as attendance ambassadors right now. But specifically for videos, we haven't been reached out. We did just have the funding allocated so that we can start looking. We've put the RQSE in to get some sort of advertising component to our campaign. So hopefully we can get the student voice on that. That'd be awesome.
Okay, because I know
Yeah.
that, so if you talk to Jen Wadsworth, I know that was one of them, that they'd done the research, they decided that was one of their areas that they felt like they could be supportive. And as I was talking to actually a student, she's a senior in Granite District, I believe. She's in the Miss Utah competition right
Okay.
now, and I said, our student advisory, is that something, granted it had to be approved and everything, is that something you'd be willing to go? And she's like, oh, and I've got so many other students, we could make this happen. So just an idea.
Yeah, I think students leading out on it would be amazing. Same with teachers and administrators. Like the more people from our schools that can talk about it would be amazing for that
Yeah, I
campaign.
really love the thought of kids telling kids why stay in school.
Definitely.
So thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, I'm looking for a motion then. Yes.
Okay, I will make a motion that the committee continue and approve R277607, Absenteeism and Truancy Prevention, Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Okay, all right, any other comments? Okay, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue and approve R277607, Absenteeism and Truancy Prevention, Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
But it's coming back to committee?
It will come back next month. We're continuing it the way it is so that it can be, it hit its 5-year review.
Okay.
But then next month, we will have it in committee with the amendments from the legislature.
Okay.
So, okay. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. And thank you. All right, our next item is R277925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program Amendment and Continuation. And do we have someone speaking to that? Erica or Kristen Campbell? No? Okay. Thank you. We're looking in the room and I forgot to look online too. Do you want to go ahead and share just a little bit with us on this one? Okay. Okay. And let me read just a little bit here. So summary of the program, the Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program was created during the 2017 general session. The program provides $5,000 salary bonus to certain teachers. Teachers must meet 2 criteria to be considered for the bonus: employed as a teacher in a high poverty school and achieve a median growth percentile of 70 or higher. And then there's stat sheet that goes with that. So the recommendation, just as you have said, one additional one-time funding was allocated for this session. So, okay. So we're continuing until it's faded out, right? Which if they don't fund it next year, then it will sunset. Yeah. Okay. Any additional comments? Yes.
So just
Go ahead.
question on that.
Okay.
So just a question on that. So we have one-time funding now. We could have one-time funding again in another year, or is there a plan to phase this out and we're just?
I don't know on that. I would.
Okay.
I see. Yeah, so the carry forward is for any of those still participating or wanting to participate, and then it will kind of finish out the program, if I understand that. Okay. Did Jennifer have any? So we just need to make a motion to remove that. Is that, oh, it is, it's stricken through mine on line 13 through 14? Oh, the draft one I have it is. So, okay. We've may just uploaded the wrong one to our, at least publicly facing, but in our documents, lines 13 through 14 are stricken, just so the public's aware of that. Let's see if we've got the right one here so we can pull up the right version for the public. Thank you for catching that. I guess I was just looking at my documents, seeing it was there. Okay, 1 minute for that to come up, and then we'll go ahead and, actually, I'm looking for someone to make a motion on that. Yep, there's the correct. Thank you.
The one that is in backup is the right one.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make a motion that the committee continue and approve R277-925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program, Draft 1, on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading.
Is there any additional discussion to this or recommendations? Okay, so the motion before the committee is that the committee continue and approve R277-925, Effective Teachers in High Poverty Schools Incentive Program, Draft 1 on first reading and forward to the board for continuation and approval on second and final reading. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. And the next item is R277-727, School Meals Program. And Jennifer Wadsworth or Kimberly Loveland, who is presenting on this one. Yeah, I just want to. Okay. Do you have any additional information to share, or is that pretty much the summary? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Yes, go ahead.
I just have a random question. On the parts where the additional state reimbursement, where they can get extra money, and it was like increased meal quality, meal access, is there enough funding where if every LEA in the state decided we are just gonna go gung-ho on improved school meals, they would get something? Or would it reduce the amount, or how does that work? I just thought it was intriguing reading this role, and like we have a little bonus for good meals.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Kim Loveland, Director of Child Nutrition Programs. So to answer your question, we've appropriated $260,000 for this year, and they can submit requests in May for that additional money. We have not received an interest at this point to increase it more than that, but that is something we could entertain. So it would, that $260,000 that we've set aside is a subset of what's available to send out for distribution.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any, like, examples of what LEAs have done in the past to receive this extra funding?
Yeah, if I can answer that. They have to purchase local foods, local unprocessed foods. That includes your dairy products. We have some districts continuing to purchase local beef from those vendors that we did under that grant, fruits and vegetables. So a lot of those things are still being served, and that's how we're helping offset that additional cost of the local food costs. You're welcome.
Can I ask a question? Yes, go ahead. I just wondered how things have changed with the improved meal presentation, because it was last session, wasn't it, that Representative Chevrier got stuff passed about getting dyes out of our lunches, and I just wanted to see if we could have an update on how things are changing in that direction with our school meals. Are they healthier now? Are things removed? Has that date come?
Yeah, if I can answer that.
Yes, go ahead.
So the K-12 food industry has been going in that direction for a number of years. So a lot of the foods, I would say most of the foods in our school meals do not have artificial colors and flavoring. They've moved over to the natural, fruit and vegetable colors and flavorings for that. So our schools really aren't impacted by that legislation because they're already doing it.
Okay. Yeah, Board Member Green, did you have a question?
I do.
Or
It's kind of a
comment?
broad question, and maybe I'll reach out to you later. But I did want to ask because my kids, they had one mission for me, like, don't come with agendas. They had an agenda for me, and one of those agendas was talking about school lunch. So I was wondering, I'm having an echo, sorry. Where do we source, like, the majority of our food? Like, there's certain companies that we order from and we bring in. And I'm gonna mention Beef Blasters. I don't know if anybody's heard of Beef Blasters, but my kids have had Beef Blasters throughout the duration of their schooling experience, and those haven't changed. And my oldest is 20, my youngest is 9. It's always been the Beef Blaster. So do you know anything about this subject, and should I come talk to you later? I have to have it on record for my children that I was talking about school lunch for them.
Yeah, if I can respond to that question. I am not familiar with the term beef blasters. I will need to talk to you afterwards about that. And I would have to get a rundown. Honestly, we don't collect the information on which specific vendors, like, we don't collect that regularly. But you've got your major food distribution lines. We've got our USDA food distribution line that we're going through as well. And then you've got your local food distribution as well. So each LEA has a menu planner, and they're responsible, to make sure that they're meeting the federal guidelines for the meal patterns. How they want to approach that is really dependent on the goals that they have for their programs and for the health and nutrition goals that they've set, for their LEA.
And are we regulated a lot through federal guidelines?
Yes.
With the food?
Yes.
So it starts there, and then I would assume that the distribution then is affected by the federal mandates, correct?
Correct.
So then they have that food, and then the LEAs source from that and by the menus that they make.
Yep.
So,
With the funding that they've got.
yep. Okay. All right.
Yep.
We should talk later over lunch. Maybe I'll bring some beef blasters for us. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, I'm just wondering, with things that are happening in the Department of Ed, is there any change that you've heard that may be coming with lunch programs where it's gonna come back to the states and not be federally regulated? When Obama was president, didn't things change where it all became national? Like, that was a big part of, because lunch ladies used to make food at schools, and that doesn't really happen anymore. It all comes pre-made, and they're just heating things up, and it's processed and not great. My kids they've never eaten school lunch. So I just wonder if we'll get more autonomy as a state. Are you hearing anything with that?
If I can answer that question. Thank you. Again, our program is under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and so I have not heard of any whisperings of, state overseeing meal patterns and things like that. The meal pattern's designed pretty basically, and it's designed with whole foods in mind. And there has been a trend over the last 5-10 years for more scratch cooking and things like that. And there are some LEAs that still bake their own bread and cook their own ground beef and some of that stuff. Again, it depends on staffing, your labor costs, the skill set that you can get in to do that cooking. It's a lot of work. So, again, it comes back down to the goals that each LEA has for their program. And for some, they resort to those reheat, and serve type items, or they'll do speed scratch is what they call it, where you do have some scratch mixed in with some convenience type items. But again, it's finding that balance between what you can do for labor, paying your skill set for labor, and then the food, right?
And probably
most of your
facilities,
budget,
right?
and your
I mean, some
facilities.
facilities just don't allow it, or
They don't have the space or the equipment.
your materials, right, your ovens or whatever after a certain period you need to replace and they're expensive, yeah, so.
But there's been extra grants for.
There has been,
grants,
you're right, over the
yeah.
last couple of years, so.
And so we have seen that decline a little bit, but we have encouraged people
Yes.
to apply for those equipment grants. They can use their liquor tax to buy equipment grants or help with labor or any of that
Okay.
stuff too.
Very good. Did you have another
I'm
question?
just gonna put a plug in. So Joanne, if you come up to Davis, I can take you through a tour through the Davis School District site. And they have a little restaurant on the side where they're up by Freeport, so they have a lot of the other industries around that will come there for lunch. It's pretty good food. So, it's an interesting tour because you see what
Could they
they
share that with other districts for
Yes,
ideas?
they do, don't they?
They do have a central kitchen, and so they have master bakers on staff, and things like that, and so.
Well, I saw the Catalyst Center has this amazing kitchen and everybody's like fighting for their cafeteria,
We
their
worked with
food.
them 1 year where the kids learned about the menu pattern and what it was, and then they had to develop their own recipes and menus to go with that. And we went and did a taste test. They did a great job. They did a really good job doing that. So, there's opportunities there. There's things that are happening. It's just, how do we get that
Yeah,
across
I'd
the
love to
board?
see, best practices and then share ideas with other districts on how.
You just need to come up north for a couple days. We'll take you out all the tours.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Well, I had,
And then we'll-
one thing that I've seen is the sharing table, right? Where if you don't want that food, you can take it over to the table, and if there's another student that's still hungry, you can go over and you can take from that. I do remember, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, I had gone during lunchtime, and it was really sad because there was like a whole garbage can just full of the trays of like carrots and celery and even the strawberries, and I was like, kids! It was so bad. But this came after that, and so I could see how schools are trying to minimize waste and how to also provide, that option if kids are still hungry. There's an option, and you just go and you just grab more. And I think that has been very successful. So anyway, yeah, it's neat to see the kitchen cafeteria problems and solutions.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking for a motion.
Okay, I'll recommend that the committee continue our 277-727 school meals program and forward to the board for approval.
Okay, any additional discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the committee is that the committee continue R277727, school meals program and forward to the board for approval. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously, and we are on to, thank you. We are on to action item 3.5, which is R277406, school early learning programs and benchmark assessment amendment. Are you presenting, Jennifer, on that, or Julie Clark's? Sydney McCartney? Okay, we have someone caught in loan licensing. Okay, so we will, let me just read a little bit of background here. How about we do that? She's running down, okay. Should I read the background or should we wait? I'll go ahead and read the background, okay? Summary of program, Utah Administrative Rule R277406 establishes a framework for the state's K-3 early learning program, aiming to build strong student foundations in reading and mathematics by requiring strict adherence to evidence-based practices like the science of reading. LEAs are legally required to administer state-approved benchmark reading assessments 3 times a year, provide targeted remediation and parental notification for students scoring below benchmarks, and consistently report their performance and intervention data to the state via the UTRAC system. The proposed revisions, staff is recommending changes to R277406 due to legislative changes that repealed early learning plans. And it gives the code there. The assessments clarify that USBE will designate the statewide mathematics assessment. They also define funding responsibility. If state funds are available, USBE will assume financial responsibility for the assessment. If state funds are not available, LEAs will be responsible for covering the cost. And then the definition of reading at grade level will be amended. Is that will be, or is that amended in this document? I'm trying to remember. Okay, so the will be means it actually is amended here. Okay. I just trying to think if it was coming again. And then staff present, okay, yes, so that's where we're at, and we're waiting to see if we can get any questions answered here. So that we gave just a rough overview here of what's going on, Julie, just so you know. Yeah, you're good. I know, and we never know for sure where we're gonna land on time, so apologize for that. I don't, like I said, I kind of read through the rationale. I don't know if you have any more to add, or if people have questions. But introduce yourself.
Julie Clark, through 12 English Language Arts Coordinator. Happy to be here with you today. Most of the changes for this are due to the repeal of the early learning plan, which was code blanking on the first part, but 218, and then also a piece of the math, the part of the math that was part of the early learning plan also. And so most of the changes are due to just that repeal, so pulling those pieces of the code out and those requirements out. And then Teresa might have some information regarding math assessment pieces as well.
Okay. That would be great. Do you want to share that? And then if there's any questions from board members, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Teresa McIntyre, Assessment Development Coordinator. So we did not get additional funding for the math benchmark, and in fact, our $300,000 that we are currently have been using was taken back. So we do not have any funding for a math benchmark at this point, and our contract is up, so we have an RFP ready to go, but we don't have that funding right now. So decisions need to be made about what we're going to do with the math benchmark, and whether or not we're going to not have it, require LEAs to pay for it, or, I don't know, figure out something different.
Okay, and specifically in this rule, it's saying that if we don't have the funding, that they'll need to cover the costs of it, right?
It says that you, as a board, decide whether or not a benchmark assessment is required. So it indicates that you may require it, and it doesn't specify who pays for it or what happens with that. So that's decisions that you guys will have to make as a board.
And when you say decisions, we're talking about that today, or are you suggesting down the road somewhere? It probably needs to be made sooner than today.
I'm suggesting you talk about it today. Yes,
I'm just clarifying that, so, okay. And let me get just a little more clarification. We've been using benchmark assessments. We've been doing them 3 times a year. And so this is how we've been measuring where students are at from kindergarten through 3rd grade. So to have nothing in here means we have no measurement tool moving forward at all.
Correct.
Would that be accurate? Okay.
For math.
For math, I'm sorry, yes, for math. Okay. All right.
Chair?
Yeah.
If you remember, last month you asked if we could provide you some data about using the assessment and being able to look at scores over time. Teresa does have that available if you want to look at that.
Yes, we would love to look at that.
Definitely have that.
Andrea, could you bring up Teresa's presentation?
So this is data that was presented to us and compiled by Acadians for Utah specifically. So if you want to go ahead.
And that's because that's what we've been requiring, just so that the public knows.
Yes, so this is
what
the
they've had
assessment
to.
that students have been taking in the state for a number of years. And so 3 times a year, they compile data for us and provide that information. So next slide. So this is going to look at students who are at or above benchmark. So this is considering students who have less risk of math deficiencies in the future. So next. So we can see this is a cross-year comparison. So we have at the beginning, middle, and end of year. For the beginning and middle, we have a 5 years data set. For the end, we don't have quite that 5-year because we're at the middle of year right now. But you can see that there is steady growth and that we are seeing great gains. So if you look at last year's middle of the year period the last year's end of the year, which was 63%, is the same as where we are at the middle of the year right now. And so we should see further growth for that end of the year within kindergarten. Next slide. And if you have any questions or want me to stop or give more information, please just let me know. So this is first grade, and again, steady gains over the last 5 years, and we are at that middle of year is aligned to where we were at the end of the year last year. Next. Second grade, we're actually higher at the middle of year than where we ended last year at the end of the year. And again, steady gains. So very positive data actually here looking at our math scores. And then third grade, same, right? Like higher at the middle of the year this year than we were at the end of the year last year for students who are at or above benchmark. Next. Wanted to look at progress. So benchmark and where students are at is important, but we also want to factor in how much growth students are making and whether they're making that typical or better growth throughout the year. So this data, go ahead to next. This is looking again at a similar data set. And you can see we're just looking at middle and end of year because we don't have growth at the beginning. But you can see that we have had steady increases in that growth piece for our students. For kindergarten, we are already showing higher growth. First grade, we did have, it's not quite as steady. We are a little bit lower here at the middle of the year, but then we were. So it's a little up and down for the first grade, but still showing. Second grade, we had similar, where we're showing at that middle of the year, we are definitely higher than we have been in the past for growth. And then third grade, again, 6% higher growth at the middle of the year compared to where we were last year. And then this is the previous slides really focused on students who were at or above benchmark. This next slide is looking at students who started the year at well below benchmark. So the majority of our students are at or above benchmark. And those students are making great progress. And we do have a significant percent of our students that are at that. However, looking at those students who are at a well below benchmark, so those are the students who are most risk. And this data shows where they are at the middle of the year. So did they make progress and did they make growth? And so Acadience looks at you want to move 80% of your students by the end of the year to a different color. And so you can see that that red is all higher than 50%, that those students still are at a well below benchmark level. And a lot of them, they need to make above typical growth in order to start closing that achievement gap. And you can see that the majority of them are making typical or less growth and not closing that achievement gap. And the reason I really included this in here is looking at this from an instructional perspective. My students who are doing well, they're great. And I can probably figure out that they're doing well based on classroom data. My students who are struggling, I need something to be able to help me know that they're struggling and in what areas they're struggling in, and are they making the progress I need them to make? And Acadience does provide that information for us. It also shows that we really need to be able to provide some more tier 2 and tier 3 interventions in math. And we've had great focus on that in reading, but we haven't had that for math yet. And our data does show that teachers aren't sure what to do to help kids who are struggling, or there really aren't a lot of great programs out there that can provide interventions and support for students who are struggling in math. So we are making incredible gains for our students who especially are at, and we're moving students up, but our students who are really struggling aren't moving as much as we would like them to. So it's kind of the below benchmark and up that are really moving and making great progress, and we're moving a lot of students into the well above benchmark level. The above benchmark level, which shows that they have little risk of math difficulties in the future, but our well below benchmark students, they definitely need some more support. And next slide. The following is just looking at Utah compared to the Acadience system. So the Acadience system, when we looked at the data, has about twice as many students as Utah. So we make up quite a large cohort of the students who participate in Acadience math across the country. In reading, there's more people that participate in the reading. So this is just looking at where we are in Utah compared to national averages within Acadience itself. So Utah is the purple, and the green is system-wide, so double the amount of students than we have in Utah. So you can see that in every grade, we are outperforming the other students who are in Acadience and taking Acadience.
How many other states use Acadience?
I don't think there are any other states that use it completely, but there are a lot of other, like New York school district area uses it. Their population is really large. There are some other districts around the country that utilize Acadience math. There are states that have given people options, and Acadience is one of the choices, and so different districts will opt into it.
And does Acadience go with more of the Common Core? So the states that have decided to go away from Common Core and do traditional math, is there a difference there?
I don't believe so. So it's not aligned to any specific standards. It's based on math skills. So thinking about early numeracy skills that students need in order to be successful in math in the future. So it's knowing numbers, being able to, count, being able to identify missing numbers in a sequence of numbers, being able to fluently add and subtract or multiply and divide, being able to do word problems. So it's not aligned to any specific set of standards, it's just math skills. Okay, and then this is students making typical or better progress at the middle of the year. System-wide is the green and Utah is the purple, and again, Utah is definitely outperforming. So I feel like we have a lot to celebrate when we look at our math data, and then also some concerns when we look at our students who are at that well below benchmark level and providing supports and interventions for them. So this is kind of where we're at with our math data currently, and that's part of today's discussion.
We've not always had, in my time of watching the board, we have not had a math test like this. Can you tell me how many years?
So our contract was 5 years.
Okay.
So we are finishing up the 5 years. So we have that 5 years.
So we will
worth of
have
data.
end of year data.
We will have end
by
of
the
year
end of the
data.
year, we will get that. We
Yes.
have that funding. Is there any knowledge as to why the state chose not to, or to take the money away?
I don't know.
Okay, I just didn't know if there'd been any
Yeah,
communication.
we did request, it was one of the board's
Right.
requests, and it didn't get picked up and it didn't get funded.
It's just a communication. And have you seen, like, obviously, we're seeing growth over time. Is there a way to compare where we were at prior to this monitoring?
There
Because really,
isn't.
that's the difference with the
Yeah,
Canadians.
so
is
it
this
would look,
const-
do you want to go back to pretty much the beginning? So that's going to show us where we started. And you can see at that very, very beginning where we started compared to where we ended up. So at the very first year, at the end of the year, we had 48% of students who were at or above benchmark and in kindergarten. And now we had, like, last year we had 63%, and then we expect to be definitely higher than that because we're already at that right now at the middle of the year.
So it's, what I'm seeing is it's kind of like this change in, we had SB 127 with reading, get us all to a certain spot. And now we kind of did a reset this year where we're now going to really be focusing on that well below. We need that
Yes.
reset with math.
Well, it would be helpful. I think one of the big things is that we didn't know where we were before, right? Teachers didn't know. And now that they know, they can be really providing support for students. And I think that's a big reason we see that improvement.
And keep in mind, we did ask for resources related to math, funding related to this assessment, and we did not get those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I
What are we-
also, oh, sorry.
Just one more question regarding the cost. If we require this, obviously we're seeing that it's making a difference, but what type of unfunded mandate are we putting?
What would be the cost for next year to continue, at least
So-
for another year till we can ask? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's two different costs for a digital license, which is what most of our LEAs are currently using, which means our kindergarten and first grade measures, which are oral measures, similar to the reading, is administered digitally. So the teacher scores it on their device. Those licenses, and then for one of our assessments, teachers can input the student's response and it will provide the scoring for the student. That license is $5.95 per student. If you just go in and enter the data and you give everything on paper, that license is currently $1.50. Now, our contract is up with them, so that would definitely be discussions with procurement as to whether or not we could extend that contract with them, or whether we do have to go out to an RFP, and I have no idea what the costs would be, and whether or not with an extension they would leave the costs where they currently are, or whether those costs would increase. That's what we're currently paying, is that $5.95 for the digital license, which almost everybody is using, and then the $1.50 for if you're just hand entering. So our LEAs already do have the cost of printing for grades 2 and 3. All of the measures are printed and students write on the papers. So that is a cost they've already are assuming is printing all of the materials for those students. If you use the digital license, or the non-digital license, it also requires printing of paper for K and first grade measures as well for teachers and assessors to give that orally.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I just want to, Amy Hunt, Assistant Superintendent.
You might have to, sorry, you're gonna have to come up. We have to see you and we have to be able to hear you too.
Okay, Amy Hunt, Assistant Superintendent. The $1.50 price that she's referring to was part of an original contract with Acadience that was provided to Utah at an extremely discounted rate. And they have already let us know that they probably will not be continuing to give us that $1.50 rate. Just needed to make sure that was understood.
Okay, so $1.75 maybe.
We don't know. No, they have not said.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any questions on that? Otherwise, we'll let Julie Clark, she had something to share.
Yeah, I just wanted, Julie Clark, P through 12 English Language Arts Coordinator, just wanted to share a little bit about the history, kind of where the math assessment came into play. So it was part of HB 114 that was passed in the 2019 session, and then was not funded that year due to, no, actually it was the 2020 session. Sorry, the 2020 session. It was not funded that year due to COVID. So it was then funded the next year in the 2021 session, which is when the math assessment was then started. We then went out for RFP, and Acadience was selected as the assessment that year. And so that's kind of when, prior to that, you would have to think like each LEA was kind of doing a math test on their own, whatever they had, that could potentially go back to that if there was not one that was required. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and which means we really can't measure over time. We're not,
Or
so people will
compare,
just use
yeah.
whatever they have or is accessible to them or free online.
Correct.
Right.
Yes, yes. So that could be the potential outcomes as well. So, and also, as Teresa was kind of talking about, we are a very unique state. We are lucky that we have one literacy assessment that we give, and we have been giving one math assessment, so everyone is taking the same assessment across the state, which really helps us to get good, accurate data from each LEA based off of what is being assessed. Many states don't have that, where it is a selection where they have given them a list of, you can choose from these 5 assessments, and it makes it hard for them to compare one LEA to another LEA. So we are fortunate in that, to be able to have that, to kind of even the playing field and be able to see that data statewide. So.
Can I ask a question? Are we looking at other options if we can't have the Acadians and we don't have the funding for what could be comparable that we can use? Do we know, or do you have suggestions?
Yeah. So Acadience is an open resource, which means that the materials themselves can be downloaded and used. What we're paying for is the reports, where the information can be entered into their system, Acadience Learning Online, and then it provides all the reports and the data, right? For teachers, for parents, for LEAs,
It does
schools.
the tracking across time,
Yeah,
right?
it shows the students' progress across time. We get data like this that provides us, where we are system-wide. The test itself is free, and we could require LEAs to give it and then provide data to us somehow in an Excel spreadsheet. And then we would have to have somebody that puts all that together. So that requires lots more effort on our part within data and statistics to compile all of that information. And it doesn't provide reports easily for teachers to use.
Or immediate, right, immediate. Yeah.
And it doesn't have that immediate information for them to use.
And this is similar to the Acadience reading in that it's a screener, so to speak. It's not a full gamut, right? It's a
Right.
very simplified screener, so we know if there's some areas of need and can give
Yes.
some targeted supports, right?
Right, and it just provides information about students at risk for math difficulties.
Which is different than the RISE. The RISE gives us information that more of the state needs
Yep.
and federal
Yep.
government and such.
Right, and the RISE is an end-of-the-year assessment designed
Yeah.
to align with our state standard and give us an idea of how students are doing in relation to the state standards. And Acadience is a screener giving us information about potential student difficulties and whether students are at risk and need additional support.
Okay. Any other questions? So currently, let's just make sure we know what the wording is in this area and make sure, I mean, I think between now and next month, when it comes to the board, I think,
Could I just ask
Yeah,
too, it
go
says
ahead.
the definition of reading at grade level will be amended. What does that mean? I mean, how will it be
Yes.
amended, I should say?
Yes, so the definition of reading on grade level, that passed in SB 241, Senator Milner's new bill, changed it previously wasn't defined in code. It is now defined in code, so now we need to align the definition in rule with what it says in code. So that is why we are changing. Yep, yeah.
and if you remember last month, we did talk about that fluctuation and what the impact is on the scores at the end and such, so you can refer back to that. Leanne, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question on the lines after that, on the different definitions. So you have scoring above benchmark, scoring at benchmark. The difference being above and at only in that may benefit from instruction on more advanced skills or may require monitoring and strategic support. So that's it. I mean, because the initial part is the same.
Yes.
They likely need effective core. Well, everyone needs effective core, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so, and it's specific to literacy. Well, the first one is learning goals. The next one is literacy. Then when we get to line 85, that one is on reading or benchmark math assessments. Why do we not list math in the first two?
I believe because we are not required to report out on, because there's no, okay, so in the definition for reading on grade level, only applies to reading.
And
And it
that's now
says,
at that,
and it says
or above.
at and above now, and so we're defining that at and above for reading. What are those? And those definitions are how they are defined through Acadience. So because we're using the Acadience assessment, we are using their definition of what at benchmark means and what above benchmark means. And so below and well below, because they're not in that definition of reading on grade level, those apply to both like reading and math. And we, I believe down in the plan, it might be repealed now because, well, it might be in the parent notifications piece. We do have to notify parents, and there are different things that we need to provide to parents who are below and well below benchmark, because we have to provide them with resources and
Even in math?
yes.
Okay, all right. Oh, that's
Yeah.
super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you go to line 44, just letting you know the change here is striking the Acadience math assessment. We're putting in a standardized assessment as defined in 53E 4307.5 that measures early mathematics skills and predicts academic achievement based on computation and problem solving for kindergarten through third grade, grade 3. So that's how that is being reworded, because we can't require, well, we are requiring something, right? It's just not the same system. And maybe we ought to, a few of us, do a little work over this next month and see what that's going to cost, what, if there's any flexibility anywhere. What would that look like if we did a portion of the cost and schools picked up a portion of it, right? So that we could, my concern is the consistency. And then if we need to look long-term, going into next year, asking for something very specific when it comes to the legislature and our requests, and if we even wanted to change assessments, which I've heard some people do or don't like Acadience, which is fine, that we do a little research into that and make sure we're getting something that works for the state and for families and communities. So just something to think about if anybody wanted to help jump on board with that. But this is where we're at right now, unless anybody wants to make any recommended changes to that language. Go ahead, Leanne.
With an RFP in the wings, so to speak, can we get costs of Acadience, like if they were to extend or renew? how do you do that with an RFP? Because that's kind of a hidden process. There's a certain amount that they have to qualify for, but that doesn't come until they've made the finalist. How does that process work if we want to have answers
Can we extend a
before?
contract?
So I do not know the answers to
Okay.
that. That would have to be somebody in procurement. As far, currently our contract does not have like an extension option, which sometimes they do have like an option to extend. So I don't know if we would be
We'd have to
able
do a little
to
work on
extend
that,
or
is what you're
not.
saying,
Yeah,
Okay.
that is not information I know. The RFP has not been sent out yet. It was ready in hopes that we got the legislation funding. We didn't, and so we've just put a hold on it because we're just not sure what we should do because we don't actually have funding.
Yeah.
Looking at other programs outside of Acadians that we were estimating around $7 a student would be what the cost would be. So we pay a little more than that for reading currently. So that was our estimate when we sent our request, our funding request. I don't know what Acadians would come back. We could definitely reach out to them. You know, we have been working with them for quite a while. We do have our reading contract with them, so they might be willing to provide us with some numbers as to if it's possible to extend that, what those costs would be for another year with them. But procurement would have to speak to whether that's even an option.
Is there any way to know this by next month when we vote on this as a board, if this passes
Yeah,
today?
for sure. If
Okay.
procurement says that that's an option that we can do that, we could definitely reach out to Acadians and have a discussion with them as to what those costs would look like if we extended for another year.
I think it'd be really helpful for us to know as we move forward what we're requiring, some really specific costs. And I guess we could look at probably the legislative business case has some of those numbers already from what our request was. But if we don't know,
Yeah, I believe our request was $7 per student.
okay.
Okay. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I am seeking a motion, looking for a motion.
Did we have amendments, Chair?
Did anyone have any amendments?
Yes,
Oh, okay, sorry, was not aware.
sorry.
We're happy to entertain recommendations.
Yes,
so.
I would recommend on lines, let me-
Okay,
oh, yes. Yes, I
Okay.
can walk you through why. So in section 6, on lines, beginning on lines 177, it is recommended, this is just, as we were looking through this, there were some things where we missed a couple of items. So, in the title on line 177, just removing on early learning plans. So it's just accountability and reporting
okay,
in the section title.
Okay.
And then also on line 188, it is referring to R277-406, section 5, which most of this doesn't apply to section 5 anymore. It applies to section 4. So we would want to change section 5 to 4.
Okay.
And then also because in code, it is required for kindergarten through grade 3, inserting the word kindergarten and grades 1 through 3.
And you're talking on line 88?
Yeah, 188. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that the three recommendations?
Yep, those are the 3.
Board member, what did you want to make those? Okay.
So I move to amend line 177 to strike the words "on early learning plans." In addition, replace R277-406-5 with R277-406-4 on line 188, and replace grade 1 with kindergarten on line 188.
Okay. Any discussion to those changes? All right, so the committee motion is, let me get my glasses on.
She did it all in one sign.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just want to get it up here.
Yes, that looks right to me. Leanne, does that, okay. Board Member Wood moved that the committee strike the words on early learning plans from line 177 and replace R277-406-5 with R277-406-4 on line 188, and replace grade 1 with kindergarten on line 188. Okay, okay, what do we need?
If we take out grade 1, then grade 1 won't be.
Kindergarten through.
Oh, does it say
grade-
kindergarten?
We probably need to put grade 3, kindergarten through 3 is what it says. It probably just needs to say kindergarten through grade 3,
Yeah.
right? So we need to add grade 3.
And then, but we're still replacing the grade 1.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that good?
Does that work? Okay. All right. And I hope everybody caught that. We're just cleaning it up, making sure it's grammatically correct. Kindergarten through grade 3 is what we changed on line 188. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. That was unanimous. Do you have any, is that good? Is there any other recommendations from staff? Okay, board members, do you have any additional recommendations? Okay, I'm seeking a motion as amended, so.
Yeah, move that the committee approve R277-406 Early Learning Program and Benchmark Assessments Draft 1 as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading.
Okay, the motion before the committee is to approve R277406 Early Learning Program and Benchmark Assessments, Draft 1, as amended on first reading and forward to the board for approval on second and final reading. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. That passes unanimously. Okay, it sounds like, do we need to maybe ask a staff member to check into that then? You've got it. Okay, so you maybe will follow up with the committee and let us know how that's, okay. Thank you. Which may impact what that looks like next month, a couple of provisions. We'll see what comes from this. So, thank you. Thank you for the information. Can we get that slide deck put into the backup so that as board members and others go to look at this, that they have the same information, or the public, it's easily accessible?
Yeah, when we move this agenda item to full board, we'll add.
Perfect.
Add the slide.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and we have a fun item on next. It's our discussion with the CTE audit report. And let's do a little, we'll do a little background on that. Kevin, do you want to give us just a little bit of background? And then who do we have here from CTE then? Wendy. She's hiding behind the screen. And then if you want to come up too, and as we probably will have a lot of questions, so. And you know what? We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thanks, Kevin, for coming up. Just a quick 5-minute break, just to let people walk around a little bit, grab a drink, go to the bathroom, and then I can tell Board Member Rill is ready to go. She's leaning forward and she's got her list. I know. Okay, we're just going to take a quick 5-minute break, so. Okay. I just need to know if we're back on yet. We're on. Okay. So we have two pieces left. Let me just establish a expectation here. I think the last item, I'm thinking we'll allocate about 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, so if we're looking at about 20 minutes too, so that gives us a good 40 to 45 minutes to discuss the audit, or at least begin that. We can continue into next month too if we need to. So I'm supposed to give very little remarks because there's a lot of discussion, a lot of thoughts around this. So I don't know, Kevin, do you want to just give us just a 2-minute, 30-second, whatever kind of narrative here?
45 minutes. You jot it.
Yeah, 2 minutes and 30 seconds starting now. Kevin
Okay.
John, Deputy Audit Executive with the Internal Audit Department, your Internal Audit Department. Okay, a brief overview, time lapse, if you will, of how we got where we're at. So in March of 2024, the board approved and prioritized an audit of the CTE program, the Career and Technical Education Program. When resources became available, we started that audit. We didn't really get into full swing until basically the beginning of 2025. So it took roughly 7 to 10 months, somewhere between there, before we really had enough resources that we could dedicate a lot of time and effort to getting the audit done. We worked extensively with your CTE department, namely Director Talia Longhurst and Coordinator Wendy Morton. They were a wonderful support and help throughout that process. So we worked with them extensively. We surveyed and sampled a number of LEAs and worked with, I believe, 16 LEAs was the design sample size, but I can't remember. I think there was a couple of those that couldn't provide data throughout the process. So not everything we looked at had the full sample size. So that audit took place throughout roughly the year of 2025, the calendar year. And that audit was then brought to the full board in early February, at which point the board released that audit. So the audit is, again, focused on the CTE program. We looked at policy, we looked at data, we looked at funding, we looked at performance to the best of our ability, and then that audit reflects our observations throughout that process. Again, it's important to note that an audit is an opinion of the auditors. That's what our opinion is based on our review. It's not to say it's the only opinion, right? Others can have separate opinions based on their analysis as well, but it is our opinion based on that. So that is that was released in February. We are directed by the board to also provide a copy of that to the legislature. We did following that meeting as well. So it has been widely dispersed. I believe a lot of people have access to it. And of course, as always, it's posted on your website as well, so the public can access it. There's your 2.5-minute overview of the audit. Happy to answer any questions related to the audit, but as far as corrective action and moving forward, that's where we've handed it off, and we can't speak to that. So.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to ask Wendy if she will share maybe some of the things that they've already started doing. Is that okay? Just as the audit has come out, some of the things that you've begun working on, maybe recommendations that you're seeing that the board needs to do, and then we have a lot of board members that have questions around it too. So do you want to go ahead and maybe not more than 20 minutes? I'm just kidding.
Can I make one comment?
Yes,
As
go
you're
ahead.
doing it, my bottom line, I would like to know is what can we change and what is going to require legislative change? So as you move through this. That's all in there. Okay. Well, some, but.
Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Wendy Morton, CT coordinator here at USBE. And it was a long process for us to go through. And what we've done since, and even as the audit was happening, there were things that we were working on even as we were going through this process. So there were things that we were aware of that we were working to correct and or improve. And then since the audit has been released and is more publicly, available, we've had additional conversations. So just real high, I guess, as brief as I can here. We've started with some of there is currently, our staff is reviewing courses, and looking at enrollments, looking at endorsements, looking at how they align to their programs with their post-secondary partners, and as well as industry partners. That is a process they're looking at overall right now, to look to see where courses could potentially be proposed to be eliminated, where gaps may exist. And that is something that is happening currently, and it will take some time to go through, but we anticipate to have a good idea by the end of summer, where some very specific courses we would know whether we need to request to delete those or discontinue those courses or not. We've had conversations with IT and data and statistics about LEAs reporting data into USBE Utrecht system, and some of the errors that were identified through the audit of no grades and no courses being reported for CT courses. We have identified that was limited to one SIS system that a number of LEAs shared. We, as a CT team, have already met with those LEAs. They are aware of the issue. They are working with their vendor to make a correction that will happen in the current year, so FY26.
So some of those specific errors were due to an SIS system, the way it was set up, and so they're looking at how to improve that already.
Correct.
Okay.
And I believe in my last conversation with them, which was probably about 2 weeks ago, they had met with their vendor and had developed a plan to correct that error for the current year. In addition to that, the IT team is developing a flag for that error in the future, and it will be implemented in FY27 school year. So because of the timeline between now and the end of the data year, and talking with the LEAs impacted, we needed to give them time for the flag, because the flag creates some additional problems for them. And I am not an SIS specialist, so just know that is not my world. That may impact their data submission for the end of the current year, and they wanted to have it implemented in FY27, which we felt like was a good option, considering that they were going to correct the error this year without a flag being in place. So that it has been done and is worked on. IT shared that information. The IT team shared that information with the SIS administrators at their last meeting last week, and so that's broadly known. We've also started conversations with the financial team at USBE to look at how LEAs are reporting their carry forward balances and their expenditures for CTE programs, and looking at how to, so potential options, how to deal with carry forward balances, because right now, the way things stands, different LEAs are using a set of accounting standards that in some cases they deal with the carry forward balances as carry forward, and some deal with it as an unearned revenue. And our agents and the financial operations, and I have been working to see if there's a way for us to clarify the type of funds that they're carrying forward, and if there's a way to limit that to one option, meaning give them a direction of how they have to report it, meaning as carry forward or unearned revenue. We haven't had any final decisions there. It's still a work in progress in that area, but we have had conversations. We've also talked about the financial report that's populated at the end of the fiscal year. The end of the fiscal year report has been outdated, and it is tied to some of the USIMS development, so there hasn't been a lot of development on, and they're probably gonna correct me somewhere, but I believe it's the UPIFS system right now that they are not expanding or developing currently. And so we're trying to see what we can do and still be collaborative in the effort to roll out USIMS and the financial pieces of that. But they are aware, they understand the issues that we've had, and we've had some good conversations. In addition, okay.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay.
So-
In addition to that, we've had a number of requests from LEAs to develop a work group around the CT funding formula. We have not started that work. But we've had a number of requests about wanting to get stakeholders together and discuss the formula as a whole based off the recommendations from the audit report, that we simplify the funding formula and look at the allocations and programs within that and how those are calculated. In addition to that, there was a change this year in code from HB1 that impacted our state statute that also will impact that discussion, which I'm also receiving a number of questions on. But overall, that would tie into what we anticipate would be a work group that would need to really dig in and look at it and see how changes might impact LEAs and what might be lift the load, I guess, and lessen the complexity of CTE funding.
All right, we're turning the time over to Sarah now. Okay. Let her start.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, then we have quite a few questions here, so we'll let you go for a minute, Sarah, and then we'll probably see if others do, but go ahead.
I've tried to, thank you, Wendy. I've tried to summarize it in a big picture way, because it feels like when you read, like when I read the attendance audit, I was like, I mean, where do we even start, right? It gets really like complex and there's so many pieces. And so I've tried to put this into like 3 sections that I think that we can focus on as a big picture. But I wanted to say at like the start of this is that I do not place any blame on USBE or CTE in any way, because I think what happened was we got excited about CTE federally and on a state level. We kept funding it. It grew and grew and grew and turned into this big blob of like, you know, complexity, and it kept increasing, and there weren't a lot of ways to look at the ROI, or it kind of just, the difference is like, look at how critical we look at math, right? We look at every score of every age, you know, we're looking at all of these different pieces of math. CTE has kind of just been ballooning along, like rolling down this hill, and been able to grow in a way without really having a good examination of it. And so I think that they even mentioned that in the audit, there's something in there that during one of the PEA committee meetings, they said, we haven't ever really looked at CTE before. And I'm like, weird, because you've examined this one tiny program that's allocated $200,000 every 2 years, like at depth, right? So I just wanted to say that in the front is that I don't place any blame at USBE. I don't think there's any reason why. I think this is a statewide issue, and I think that the legislature, USBE, and USHE all need to re-examine how they're looking at CTE statewide. So my 3 areas. My first area is that there's clearly been a lack of guardrails and measurements. We have incredibly poor performance on these certificates. I think it's that 60,000 out of 170,000 students who tried to earn certificates earn credit, and there's only a 35% pass rate. So that's an issue. There's no ROI for our measurements, so we don't know, you know, if we're teaching bicycle maintenance, maybe there can't ever be an ROI on that, but like if we're teaching something like physical therapy assistant, what is the ROI? Are they going into it? Is this a benefit? Are we needing jobs in physical therapy in the state of Utah? Why are we teaching that class? And then so that's the first one, the lack of guardrails and measurements. And then the second one is that we're not being effective in our purpose and our state goals. So when we look at technical programs in these certificates, a lot of the emphasis is that students should learn about all of these industries, right? There's all these industries and there's industry need. And the state has come out like big about, we need to focus on aligning with the workforce, aligning with industry, and helping students discover these alternative pathways to employment outside of a 4-year bachelor degree, right? And so we've put this emphasis in that, we've made these pathways and these clusters, and yet we have at the same time thrown money at it without having a good way of looking back and saying, are we aligning these programs with the industry needs? At technical colleges, they will have frequent realignment in, okay, we need more machinists, we need more welders, we need more line, they like go up the electric poles and fix the power lines, whatever. We need those. So they'll shift and say, this program, we don't have jobs in the state of Utah for this anymore, so we need to close this program. So we need to be better about doing that. What it feels like is we've just added fun classes. We have a requirement for students to take 1 credit of CTE, but we've added all of these fun classes for students that I love. They're hands-on, they're learning different things, and maybe exploring careers, which I think there's a benefit there, but we're not really like saying like, is there good outcomes to these classes that we're adding? The other part is that we have this issue with quality instruction. We know that it's really difficult. If you ask a technical college, it's really difficult to find faculty that are willing to drop their $200,000 salary to go teach at a tech college. But at the same time, we need those people with the experience to teach that. So then now put that on the K through 12 level. We're trying to find people who are good in these industries. We have all these necessary requirements for licensure, but it's really difficult to find quality instruction. So then the last third one is that we're not, so the first one is lack of guardrails and measurements. Second is we're not being effective in our purpose and our state goals. And the third one is that we're not aligned with the technical system and industry. And this has been my biggest, this is why I asked for this audit, was because I thought, why is the state being so fiscally irresponsible by putting tons of money into CTE and tons of money into these technical colleges, and at the same time, we could have the technical colleges aligned and working with articulation agreements through concurrent enrollment to teach those classes and have them actually earning certificates. Because if we're spending tons of money and resources and building all these new tech centers, and these students are learning all these cool hands-on skills, but they're not getting a certificate, we're not doing the student any service, because they're not getting what we, the state, needs, and also what they could do to improve their economic outlook. So there in the code, it says that a technical college shall provide competency-based CTE courses that fulfill grad requirements. So it's in the code that these technical colleges are supposed to be supporting K through 12, but at the same time, we've created our own technical college system within K through 12 without the benefits of getting that completion and certificates in most cases. So I think that what we need to do is we need to be more aligned with these technical colleges, and there was a recent bill that was passed last legislative session that opens up concurrent enrollment for technical colleges. It was our dear friend Angie who led this out to try and open that up, because we're being fiscally irresponsible by keep building these technical school CTE buildings and also building all these new buildings with in higher ed to try and get kids to go out and go into these different technical programs and skill programs. And we're providing all the classes and the fun time welding, but we're not giving them the certificate. It makes no sense to me. So those are kind of my three big things, is that we're not aligned with the technical system, we're not effective in our purpose and our state goals, and we have a lack of guardrails. The one thing on the lack of guardrails I just want to say is that we don't have any good performance measures. So we can provide Emily and Jenny and I were all on this committee when we went through all the CTE standards. Like, I was like, there's a bazillion classes that we teach, but like, what is our performance measures? How are these worthwhile? The money, and I think this is also in the audit, it talks about how the money it costs to run these very technical programs is really expensive. The equipment's expensive, the faculty is expensive, all these things are really expensive. And oftentimes, our students that are learning those in the classrooms, because we know that our K through 12 is underfunded in a lot of ways, they're behind on the technology. So we're not doing them any service if they're learning on programs in some area that's actually 5 years behind. when at the same time, the state is also funding for students to learn that at the technical college, and they have the better equipment. So we need some sort of performance measures in these courses, because right now we're just allowing all these LEAs to add CTE courses without any, what is the ROI on that? How is that aligned with industry standards? Is there an opportunity to partner with a technical college? There are technical colleges across our state. They're in every area of our state. And so I think we need to be better about that. So those are my 3 big things that I think that I would like us to, on a big picture, kind of reevaluate how we're doing CTE. And I think that it's something that needs to be USBE, USHE, and the state of Utah at the same time that works on all 3 of those.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comments to any of those? I mean, I think that I had similar questions. I had one question I wrote down on page 18. I said, are LEA technical centers, are they offering the exact same thing as higher education technical centers? That's a question I had, is are we offering the very same thing, and we are assigning certain regions actual higher ed technical centers, and then we're also offering, I'm just trying to figure that out.
And
Kevin,
on that
you were going to
question-
hit your
The other
button,
question
so-
too, are we offering the same things, and does it include a certificate? Because I think that's the biggest piece.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it. Wendy may want to speak to it as well. And I'm actually going to maybe speak a little bit for Wendy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that's some of the frustration we experienced during the audit, is some of the things you're expressing. And I think those are some of the frustrations that your CTE staff feel as well. Like, for example, the ROI. In our discussions with CTE, they would love to know that information, but it would require collecting information right now that we're not allowed to collect, right? And so it would take maybe an act of legislature to say, yeah, we can collect Social Security. Correct me if I'm wrong, again, if I'm wrong, but. So those are some of the things in the audit we wanted to look at. We wanted to look at ROI. We wanted to look at performance. We wanted to look at those relationships with those tech colleges. We tried. We reached out to some of those programs to see, and there were just not very good alignment. It would take a lot of work for us to figure out, is that the exact same course being offered at the tech college as, in higher education or in public education? There are articulation agreements. I think in the audit report, we reported that I believe it was over 36,000 students in public education did take almost nearly 200,000 credits in the university. So it is happening. There are agreements in place. There are working. Location is a driving factor in a lot of cases. Member Real, you mentioned that there's opportunities throughout the state. There are. Some are easier than others, depending on your location, right? And so we talked to...
Sorry, really quick. Are those concurrent enrollment credits or CTE college credits? Because there's a huge difference of taking like English 1010 concurrent enrollment and taking like a CTE.
Yeah.
Credit.
CTE in particular is what we looked at, right? And so, needless to say, I think some of the things you're expressing are the same frustrations we felt as we conducted the audit. It's like we wish we had some of this information. We wish that there was better alignment between the systems, that there was more transparency or clarity. And so, I think we support the statement you're making. I think that's kind of what the audit report states as well, that there is room for improvement as far as alignment, consolidation or collaboration with the different partners. Legislation is clear that it is supposed to be a partnership, an effort that we work together. And you can see where those efforts are playing out, and some planning consortia are having better luck than others in making that happen. But there is some financial incentive to do it in-house as an LEA as well, right? Because some of those financial structures say, hey, the more CT clusters or courses you offer, there is some money tied to that, right? If you have a technical center, there's money tied to that. Whether it's completely offsetting, I don't think so, right? So needless to say, I think there are some improvements in the system that could lend to some of those outcomes that you're looking for, but it would require changes, obviously.
And that was one of the other things that stood out to me, is those line items, right? I just kept thinking, is there any way that we could put all that line item into one item, and that the form that someone fills out is related to the pieces that they need? Does that make sense? Versus all these different programs. And I think you spoke just a little bit to that there's a lot of complexity in the funding as well as the, requirements. So, and maybe that's something that this broader work group, and I'm not sure who that all entails, is going to be looking at. So maybe could you speak to the broader work group and maybe that idea of simplicity, or maybe one, right, contract, grant, whatever it is, so, or distribution formula, so. Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the work group hasn't been formed yet. We're waiting for discussions with the board to make sure that that was a direction that they would like us to go. But we have had a number of requests from industry partners, requests from board members, or not board members, I apologize, from local, like advisory board members, the CTE directors, some of the colleges have asked about that, including technical colleges. So we would expect to see a variety of people on that committee is what we were thinking would be best, because we need a variety of stakeholders involved that would represent all of those that would be impacted. It is complex. Could it be simplified? It can be simplified. What the right answer is, I honestly don't know. I've dealt with funding for CT programs for a number of years, and I do understand how we got to where we are, and why it has worked the way it has worked, but I don't think it's the only way it can work. And with the additional laws code that was passed this last year around concurrent enrollment with technical colleges, that's actually going to really help with alignment with technical colleges. We do have alignment in some places, but again, in a lot of ways, it was people-centric. Those people that worked there together, if it went well, they collaborated well. If it didn't work so well sometimes. And with the addition of adding that to concurrent enrollment, it gives us more opportunity. And that work is actually also started.
Okay, I'm gonna let's get some other input here, and then we'll try to.
So I sat on the first credential work group, and I mean, hours, like that entire summer, we were meeting every other week for 3 hours at a time. It feels like there's kind of this dual track where we let CTE almost be this nebulous thing over here, where with first credential, we hopped in, but CTE is kind of in the center of that. How much of the work that was done through that first credential could we go back and look at? Like I was looking at this 68-page master plan that we came up with in that work group, and even the very first thing, the economic threshold review, right? Does it require a living wage? Is there a demand? Like all those things could be used similarly to determine, is a CTE course getting us to that first credential? Do you see a tie-in there where we could take some of that hours of work that we put in and kind of backtrack to a CTE model?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we actually are using that information as our staff are starting to look at courses and programs. We don't consider all of that work separate from CTE. It has informed a lot of where we think we should be going, and what we should be considering because of the hours and the work and the structure that was put into that program. It was well guided, and I think in the past there's been maybe disagreements between maybe LEAs in different parts of the state, different regions, about what a sustainable living wage actually is. And so it might be perceived different in one part of the state than another part of the state. And by adding that information in through the first credential, it gives us a level ground to maybe look at our programs and start including that in our evaluation process. I mean, to give you an example, we've had just since fall, we've had 6 new health science courses requested in partnership with LEAs and colleges. 6 new, very specialized. And they're not thinking about the capacity of LEAs. And I don't want to say they're not thinking about it. Their partners are involved, they're having discussions, right? But as a state, we do need to consider whether or not we should be adopting 6 new courses that are maybe highly specialized, even if we do have a post-secondary partner involved. Maybe it is the right thing to do. Maybe there's other ways to accomplish what they would like to have accomplished. And that's something that we have been focusing on very intensely about whether or not to even, how do we accept and then evaluate those requests? And all we can base it off of is data sets, right? What is the need in the economy? What is the employment outlook? What are the post-secondary programs, do they have their own enrollment? Are they completing students? And do our students have a place to go if they leave secondary? There's lots of pieces within that to get to the discussion around ROI. And so that, yes, we have been considering that. I know that was a long answer, sorry.
That was great, and I'm glad to hear it, because so much work was into that and so much input. I mean, we had DTC, or the technical centers there, we had the higher ed there, we had USBE involved in all of our, and then input from the LEAs that were actually implementing it. So it was, and the discussions really got into the meat of things as we moved, because we had a third-party facilitator who led the whole process. One of the things I've seen at Davis is their Catalyst Center and their DTC, they try really hard not to offer the same thing, that duplication. Even if you look at their small house construction, they don't do plumbing at the Catalyst Center because DTC does. And so they'll bring the students to the Catalyst Center. So it's a really nice partnership if we could see that throughout the state without the duplication of effort. So thank you.
Can I ask a quick question on along that line? So, science, right? That's what the certificate funding, or the certificate vendor, it feels like a vendor. Yeah. Is that right? Okay, so we have the majority of the students that are taking those certifications, it's under U-Science, mostly, right? Is that correct?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yes, so the majority of the skill certifications that
Yeah.
are awarded are through U-Science currently. We do use other licensing bodies when there are programs that have those available for students that are high school age.
Okay. So so when I learned about U-Science, I kept thinking, I'm like, is this a gimmick? Because it's like, it feels like it's just a big vendor that we spend a lot of money on to offer these skill certificates. So then I started doing research. I'm like, can you get a job with a U-Science skill certificate? You can in most cases. But then when I started looking through U-Science in Utah, their industry partners, we have 3 industry partners with U-Science. IHC, or Intermountain Health, the Marines, and 1 tech group. And I'm like, that seems like if this is the majority of our skill certificates that are being offered, I guess I'm just curious as to why we use something like this third-party vendor to offer these certificates, and is it fully aligned with our state, and is it helpful for students to have those certificates, or is it just a fun certificate? And also, why don't we have more industry partners with them? It seems like that, if we're gonna be focusing majority of our students taking these skill certificates through U-Science, we should have that be more robust, or we should lessen the U-Science certificates and increase these other more applicable, usable certificates through other, assessments that are applicable for high school kids, right?
Yeah, so the work with U-Science, and it was formerly a different company, but the work really started tied to our funding allocation around competency. So the idea as the program developed was that students in a technical program should be able to demonstrate a certain level of competency, and the certifications were developed that way, and the partnership with the vendor was developed that way. So as they go in and take a U-Science certification, it is tied directly to our course strands and standards, and the expectation is a certain level of competency. There are some industry partners who will accept those U-Science certifications. Some are more well-known than others, obviously. And I would say from my personal, this is a personal perspective, that they give more value to the student as a whole versus individually. Meaning a student who has multiple certifications that show a certain level of competency within the content they've studied would be more valuable to an employer than an individual one of those. And I do believe as they're looking at the first credential program, that they are also viewing those that way, that there are some that are more directly tied to industry, more of a entry-level type of certificate versus, I'm ready to work and I'm out there and I'm gonna do this thing. Did that answer
Yes,
your
totally,
question?
absolutely. I feel like that would be one thing I would love the working group to look at is like, what is this youth science and is it effective?
Can I make one comment about their industry partners? I do believe they have more industry partners.
Okay.
I think that I would have to ask them for their most current list. I'm
Yeah.
not sure where you found the list,
It's
but
on the-
I will, that's something I could follow up on.
It was on the Elevating Utah Students, it's like Utah and U Science page, and so there was only 3 on there.
Okay.
But I think it totally could be changed. Because I feel like, so if they're giving these skills certificates and those skills certificates can be articulated into credits that lead to a technical degree, that's great. But if they're just like a certificate to have a certificate that says you know this much, it just needs to be the competency-based piece, like it has to really make sure it goes from you're getting this certificate and you can build onto it, because that's like the most important piece is like how can you build onto this, because the state of Utah has changed. So the technical colleges now, if you get a technical certificate in something, you can take that and it articulates now into you get a welding certificate that could end up being a MBA, right? They're building that in. So I feel like we really need to make sure we're also having those certificates be something that they can build on and that it helps them get jobs. Like I want to make sure that like if they're getting a certificate, it could help them do that job through college or continue on that job.
And can I ask, why are we using U Science versus having a standardized grading scale or certificate program that our CTE state staff does themselves? Why are we using a vendor to do that?
So we have used a vendor because of really what it takes to develop a certification or an exam of that type, the capacity of our own staff within USBE, and a certificate from a third party tends to look a little bit different than just saying, here the school or Utah gave you student a certificate that says this thing. And so as they started, they've always had a third-party vendor to help with the nuances that go along with creating a test, and keeping those tests, or exams, I guess you would say, updated and developed in a way that could articulate competency for the courses.
Okay.
And we haven't had the capacity internally.
Sorry, you look like you had a comment, Kim.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly state for context, it's important to note that the legislature is the one that passed this requirement that we can use up to 20% of the funding for competency-based attainment. So I believe it's 7% is what's currently being allocated of the possible 20%. It's one of the questions we raised. But again, there needs to be something to demonstrate this proficiency in order to meet that legislative requirement. And so skill certificates is what's been used to do that, and U Science is one of those. Again, there are industry. We pointed out in the audit that yes, the vast majority are U Science, but it's because as you have these burgeoning course offerings, industry isn't necessarily creating certificates to support those, right? And so U Science is kind of backfilling and filling in some of those to say, hey, we're offering these courses, how do we demonstrate competency? And so they're creating those. And for an industry certification, right, Microsoft, say for example, they make the determination of what it looks like to be competent. You pass their test, you're competent. With U Science, there's both a test, but also coursework that needs to be done essentially in order to meet that. And we broke that down in the audit to just say, here's people who didn't reach it because they didn't pass the exam. Here's ones who didn't reach it because they didn't pass the course, and here's students who didn't reach it because they didn't do either. So again, keep in mind, again, for context, that this is a legislative requirement that we have to have something. We do point out in the audit that there is possibly some redundancy now between first credential program and skills certification, because in some regards, they're both could be used to demonstrate this attainment of competency or proficiency. So that's an area that maybe you could look at, but of course, they have different qualifications at this point, but some context.
So you put specifically in there that not all certificates that UScience develops are recognized as credentials of value. So do those ones that are not credentials of values, they're obviously providing some skill that they have learned. Are industry partners at all working with those where it's like, okay, if you got 6 of those that seem to have little value, but you accumulate those into something of value, is there any of those partnerships going on?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so, yes, it really has depended on the work that's happened more locally. Those tend to be more local with a direct partnership with an industry. Quite a few years ago, we had a partnership with what was at the time LDS Business College. They came in and they were able to look at those assessments and actually sent their professors in and took the assessments. And then they articulated statewide that any student who's certified with this level and this many certifications in a particular area came into the program that they were offering. And they looked at one program in particular and that didn't have a lot of industry recognized credentials at the time, and they offered students credit at the college in exchange for having completed those courses and certifications. It is in pockets. It is not consistent, and while it hasn't been consistent over time, partially because of transition of industry and how it grows and changes, and part of it in shifts in people, in both in higher education and locally in LEAs.
Can I ask, Leanne, do you want
To follow up,
Sure.
I think the shift also, you look at AP credits. Once those that was the gold standard, right? Like you got AP and you could go in as a first semester completed college student, and now fewer and fewer are taking those. So how do you create a program that's sustainable with changes in industry, changes in requirements, and changes in people's belief system that, yes, this is a value? So it's such a challenge.
Okay. And any other questions or
I
comments?
think that, I'm looking at, I really like the suggestions that Board Member Reel has brought and the way that she articulated it into 3 areas. I think the return on investment is something that the audit shows some really key things that we can work on. This is a great area that I think our students definitely need and find value in, but we need to figure out a way to get a working group and streamline, look at the costs, the return on investment and whether it's translating into jobs and something. I mean, sometimes it's great just to have added skills and find out what you're interested in as well. So I appreciate that, but I thought it was really concerning that we have so many classes, such a huge percentage that don't have students in them, that we're funding courses with 0 students at times. So one of the things it said was that there were 45% of active CTE courses have fewer than 100 students statewide. So we need to look at where we can sunset classes that aren't being used, and are places holding on to classes to receive funding, and is anybody checking to see whether their students enrolled or not? Is it tied to enrollment or just tied to having the class there? So that we're making sure we're being fiscally responsible, because we've had almost $1 billion in taxpayer funds set aside for CTE. So what are suggestions coming out and what are we looking at there?
May I just clarify?
Yes.
Answer one question. We are not funding courses that do not have enrollments, meaning they have to have enrollments to count for any of the funding pieces. So to just clarify that. The other thing is that we do have currently at USBE a process in which, in order for a concurrent enrollment course to exist, there has to be a non-concurrent enrollment course that exists. And so in some cases, the majority of our students may be taking concurrent enrollment in a given course, and the other course may have low enrollment. And so you may see in some cases, or vice versa, where most of the students are taking the non-concurrent class and only some LEAs are offering the concurrent level. So both of those things impact that number, as well as just some requests from LEAs and/or industry partners that have come over the years that are very specialized and have few students in the courses.
And then it also looked like that grading was not across the board. I mean, there was a lack of transparency because things are reported differently and all over the place. Anyway, do you want to speak to any of that?
Yeah, I'll touch on the first topic quickly and just clarify, yes, we agree with what Coordinator Mortensen said. Like Morten said, if there's no students in the class, there's nothing really being funded, right? So our point is you have to maintain those, right? There's lists that those courses stay on. And I think the argument we're making is there is a process in place, there is a standard operating procedure they have. Could that be streamlined? Could it be more efficient so that some of these courses can come off more quickly as they're being introduced? Like Wendy mentioned, 7 new courses in hospitality or
6 in health sciences.
Oh, health sciences, okay. 6 in health sciences, okay. But it's like, yeah, there is this interest to add courses. Are we equally as efficient in removing them? And I think that's the argument that we're trying to make there. Because there was one course, for example, I think it was dog training, that we saw one student in, and it's like, is that a course that should even be offered in public education? I think there's a question that could be asked there. Is it too specialized? Is there enough interest that we maintain the standards? I don't know. So needless to say, I think that was the question we were asking there. And your second question was related to the grading standards. Again, when we went to look at performance, that was one of the areas that we were kind of excited to dive into on CTE. And what we found is there's just not a lot of good information that you can look at across the LEAs. And so we were hoping to do an analysis to say, well, student or LEAs or schools that had these approved CTE programs, did their students perform at a better level? Because there's these higher added costs. Is that better teachers? Is that better equipment? Is that more, And what we found when we just looked at LEA policies related to grading is the policies diverge so much from one LEA to the next that even if you wanted to compare A's to A's, what it takes to get an A is not equal, right? And so that was our concern, that in one LEA you can get a 59% and get a C minus, and almost for the rest of them that translates to an F. Yeah, but again, the question then is raised, well, what does it take to get a 59% in that LEA as opposed to another? So grading's difficult. We talked to Wendy and Talia about it extensively. We all agreed there's just really not we could do on this front, whether or not that's a place for USBE to get involved, or if that is the local control issue. I mean, I think that's a question. But at this point, again, going back to what data is there available to see, are we getting a return on our investment? Can we do, cross LEA analyses on, are these programs offering benefit is limited at this point.
Can you speak to like you said, one LEA said they had 1 CTE class, and yet some had 13 or so. If that one class, every student, basically that becomes a required class for every student in that LEA. However, financial lit is sometimes considered a CTE. So can you speak to just that single LEA, how they're approaching digital skills, CTE, and financial literacy in terms of graduation requirements?
Okay, it's going to be a little bit more complex than this. I hope one of the takeaways from this audit is how complex CT really is. And it's not just limited to funding, but it's how it's organized, how it's offered, in what, So when we looked at LEAs, not every LEA or every school offers grades 9 through 12. Right? And so if you're an LEA who only offers up to grade 9 and you offer 1 CTE course, that may be appropriate, right? And so we were not trying to do value judgment that, hey, it's inappropriate to have 1 or that you should have 104. I think what we were trying to stress is the different experience you might have as a student depending on the LEA you go to. If you go to a smaller LEA in maybe a more rural area that does offer K through 12, you might only get exposure to 15 or 20 different CTE courses. But if you do attend a Davis, for example, who has, you know, a Catalyst Center, a Tech Center, or whatever, and all these different opportunities, you might have hundreds of CTE courses that are available and offered there. So I wouldn't get very concerned on the actual count itself, because depending on the LEA or the school, that may be appropriate. So we did try to point out in the audit report that, hey, if you're attending an LEA and you're attending an LEA that offers grades, say K through 9, you're of course going to need to find a secondary school that offers CTE courses. So, but we are aware of the fact that there are LEAs, particularly ones that do not have approved CTE programs, of which I believe right now there's 32 LEAs that don't have approved CTE programs. They're not getting this additional funding. We know that they have limited CTE courses. They have far fewer than those who are getting additional funding. In particular, funding like the high school WPU, that you get additional funding by offering additional courses and stuff. So we would expect to see growth in those areas.
Okay, so just, we probably need to narrow down. There's a couple items. This is not an action item, but we can give direction to Leah or other staff
Yeah.
to start looking at things. You know, if we had specific actions, I think if you don't mind, if this body doesn't mind, I think we could continue this discussion with some additional questions. I have a number of questions too next month, if that, does that feel?
Sure.
Kevin, can you come back?
And-
Wendy?
In the meantime, can I?
Yes, but
Yeah.
I think we can give direction, because if we have to wait 4 or 5 months to get some of these things, like begin a work group that can start putting things together that would create action items for the board based on this, I think those things, and it sounds like there's discussion there that we want to lean into that. Sarah, you had some recommendations. Do you want to make those
Yeah,
recommendations?
I would like to direct staff to look at R277911 and related rules, and then bring the committee their changes and suggestions in October. I think that gives them enough time to work through those rules.
Do you want October as the date or what? Yes. Go ahead.
I'm okay to ask a question.
Yes.
So not related to the audit, but would be impacted by the audit potentially. We do have a need to bring 9/11 in some part to you before October because of legislative changes that happened, which Elise is aware of. But there are a couple changes that will need to happen for. If
So you're
we
thinking
can.
May, June? Is that what you're
Yes,
looking at?
in-
Okay.
In
Is it-
part, and I just didn't want you to not be aware of that as you were having this discussion. It's not gonna solve the overall big question, that's not enough time. But there are a few things that would need to come before the board to have taken care of for next fiscal year.
So I guess it could, yeah, I feel like it would be something that like we could make those changes for the legislative, but still I want like from the audit recommendations
Maybe that could be.
come in October.
Needed rules. I mean, maybe if you left it broader.
Yeah,
that
9/11 and related
by
rules.
fall or something.
Yeah.
By fall, that we look at some of those needed rules that need to be updated. And that would still allow that flexibility with current legislation and such.
And then the other piece was I know that there's been a lot of work done at the system of higher education they've changed their internal rules. They've changed their rules and policy to include CTE as part of alignment with concurrent enrollment, and they have some recommendations. So the other request that I have for my dad calling me over and over again, is that we collaborate with USHE as they start to develop their plan as well.
Okay. Okay. And I,
We definitely need to, do we need a formal motion to vote on that?
no, I think we're just directing staff
Report on that.
because,
We need that,
yeah. And then,
Can I ask too, or is Sarah still making motions?
And that's it. I just wanted to direct staff for those 9/11 and then collaborate with USHE and.
Well, there was something that came up in the audit about the 13 CTE clusters being restructured, but it was just put on our consent calendar, and like there were no changes, but there were some significant changes in all 13 sections. And so I wondered if you could address that was in the audit.
Does that come out of GoEd?
Let me, yeah, I'm okay to respond?
Yes,
to
go
that.
ahead.
So what happened is the clusters that we organize in is simply how the pathways that you guys approved, the content within those pathways did not change. What happened is the cluster names changed and where the pathways fall within, with some of those pathways where it's sort of a grouping mechanism that we report in federally. And so we were trying to communicate to our LEAs how those pathways were grouped, and that transition happened within like 60 days of you guys approving already the clusters as they had come through, and we didn't know until they'd already been published nationally that where those changes were and how they would impact us as a state. So really our effort to communicate to LEAs about how the groupings are nationally. It did not change the content that you approved within the pathways, the number of pathways, or any of that. None of that changed. So I hope that clarifies like what you guys actually approved and what happened. If you want a different process, or if you want, I mean, obviously, we could have.
Well, it gave suggestions that the board maybe look at changing how we do our consent calendar to make sure that things aren't hidden or false claims. Like it seemed a little significant in the audit for the board.
Yeah, again, significance, I don't know on that. You know, we'll leave that to each board member to determine how significant it was not. What we were arguing is transparency is important. It's important for board members to know exactly what happened in order to make those decisions. And so we are aware of exactly what Wendy expressed there, that it was more reshuffling to align with national, what's the national organization, the name, the National Career Clusters Framework. Yes. And so, yeah, so I think our position was transparency matters. And
Just
so
the
if you're going to
communication.
reshift, it's about communication, not as much about some nefarious act trying to slide something under in the cover of a consent calendar, but transparency matters. And so let's make sure we're transparent and everyone understands that there is a reorganization of clusters and pathways. I will say another issue that we did raise that's germane, I think, to it is just that approval process in general. What does that look like? What are you actually approving? Do you know what you're really approving? And does the board rule, does that adequately represent the process that you think that you're going through? Because I think, that, in my opinion, there could be some misalignment there. If you read the law and what you think is being done versus what may actually be being done may not be identical. So, and I think a lot of that has to do with the conflation of terminology in the rules. What's a pathway? What's a program? You know, some of those things. It says you have to approve programs. Are you really approving a program? If so, what is a program? Or are you really just approving pathways and how they relate to clusters or things of that nature? So that's our position.
Can I add one bit of information for you? Those clusters, that's the first time it's changed in probably 15 years. So it's not a frequent change, so just you're aware you're not going to see that happen on a regular basis. That's something that rarely changes.
Okay. Board Member Green, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is it a lack of maybe definition within rule that you're seeing? Like, could we develop the definitions within the rule or the policy, or what's lacking there that's those terms are kind of getting mixed up?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a lack of definition. I think in some cases you have overlapping definitions. You have two definitions for the same term. You might be using a different term than it's being used in Utah code. And so when we wrote the audit report, that's why we include a glossary. We felt like it was important to say, like, this is the term that we're using and this is what we mean by it, because depending on which rule you're in, they might define CT program differently. And so one of our recommendations was, right, when you're looking at those board rules and you're looking at terminology, is there a way to use similar terminology throughout Utah code? Maybe adopt what's being used in Utah code and apply it to board rule, make sure that there's consistency within board rule. When you're talking about a cluster of rules that all kind of relate to CTE, why not use the same definition for a CTE program? There are rule writing guidelines that help, administer that and guide that. But yeah, that was just one of the things when we went through it, we were confused. And that's not uncommon for auditors. We're frequently confused as we get into new programs and we're having to learn. But in particular, we felt like the terminology could be clarified to help make sure that, anyone who reads these rules understands what's happening from, 914 to 915 as you're moving throughout the different rules. So
that may be, as we're moving into the fall, just really looking at those, making sure we're aligning with code, and then all the rules have similar language used the same way. So that would be another thing to kind of take into consideration. Did you have something else?
Yeah, is there a way, like, as we begin to work through that, to communicate that to us, like, as it comes up? And I would assume we would do the same, like, just keep track of maybe that overlap that you're seeing.
will you repeat,
I
Member
was
Green,
just
just to make sure we
wondering-
understand? Are you asking for a monthly report as far as, or are you asking for clarification on specific terms
Just
that
to,
are?
I mean, it sounds like as you went through this audit, that those presented as you went to, as you studied more. So I was just asking if you come across, today we came across an overlapping definition or terminology, just for your awareness. And then that, I don't know how we do that. I'm just thinking if there's things that we can do on our end as the rules come through and we can have better definitions. I think that falls in our line of work that we can help out with.
Yeah, I think we could add that, especially as the work group is getting
Yeah.
together and looking at a number of things, and then just as we come across them in general, yes, that's something that we could easily put together if we come across it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, and I just wanted to, so back to the original, some of the recommendation there. I would think you could go ahead and get started working with Leah on that work group, that broader work group, which could include USBE or others, to start really narrowing down what we need to do, right? And it sounds like there's interest there. Is that right? Okay. So I just want to make sure that was clear. Yes.
Let me share what I have as notes
Okay.
to make sure that I've covered. So I have the action item for me being addressing the audit systematically for specific things. Determine what updates need to be made to R277911 to move towards addressing the audit. Then that would be including what you were just talking about, Board Member Green, about definitions. Work with USBE to coordinate all of the updates and addressing the audit in general. Develop a stakeholder work group, and then provide periodic updates to you as a committee.
Okay. Does that sound about right for everyone? Okay. There was one other question I was going to ask. Oh, that's all right. I guess if we.
Email that to us too, like that highlight of, yeah.
Okay, I think we're done with this section. So, and I think we're gonna, is it okay if we add on, again, I have a few questions for next month if we added another 20 minutes or so towards the end of our meeting? Okay, thank you. Andrew, you make sure that, okay. Yes?
To reiterate, my criticism is not with USBE. I think you guys do great work. I know that it's just turned into this giant blob of, we need students to have these skills. Well, it's fun to teach this class. Let's add this class. We have someone that can teach this random CT course. That's approved. There's money going in. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows and public knows, like, my criticism is not with CTE at USBE. It's just the state as a whole needs to look at this more holistically than just, we can't be the only ones to solve it, so.
Thank you. All right, Megan. We've got 5 minutes. You did a lot of work. This is what we're going to do, though. We're going to go 5, and this is going to be the first item on our agenda next month. So would you just make that, and will you make it an action item next month so that if people have action that they can actually make that. So go ahead. We'll throw some things out there and try to get where we can. So, and thank you. That was, as I reviewed through what each state does, that was very, very interesting. We're a lot alike with some states and very different from some states. So it was a very interesting look. So go ahead.
Sure. Megan Everett, Director of Teaching and Learning. So in the discussion for how to revisit our standards revision process, we pulled what every other state is currently doing. And in looking through those, there's a few states that are pretty clear on what they do. They put out a detailed process the way that we do. There are a lot of them that have rules and regulations in their policies, but then each time they are doing a revision is slightly different or a little bit different direction, you know, with some big guidelines. And so each of these states has some elements similar to us. There's something that triggers revising the standards. For a lot of states, that's coming from their legislative requirements or is done by the superintendency or could be brought forward by the staff on a routine basis. All of them do something with their board that kicks off the opening of those standards. All of them have some form of public comment, and all of them have some final approval by their board. What it looks like outside of that is pretty different. Many of them operate in a year process, but many are longer. So they're kind of all over the map. There is a second document in there with some considerations just based on what other states were doing and what we might be able to do if you wanted to look at our processes. So one of the longest elements that wouldn't necessarily take a major revision of policy or anything would be to cut our writing timeline. So we put 6 to 14 months. The drawback of that, so you could bring in people and get real intensive. One, you'd have to really align that with summer probably for our educators. And two, do people do their best work in that kind of setting, right? With a pressured timeline where they can't walk away, think, come back. So that is where our biggest chunk of time comes in that might be more easily adaptable. Right now, we do everything kind of one after another, right? We convene the initial kind of writing and feedback committee before we convene our writing committee, before we do the next step. There are some places where we might be able to overlap that a little bit better, go ahead and start pulling our writing committee while the revision committee is meeting. And there are other states that do those concurrently. So where we are required to have that initial parent feedback and look, there are some that do that side by side with their writing committee, and they kind of work together. Our board, and what I did not notice in other states, I don't know that I found any, has the 2 different feedback periods that were more recently added into our process, where you have the 30-day review and we address them with the writing committee, and a different 30-day review and address them with the writing committee. I didn't see that in other places, but there are some places that require board members or some representative to serve on the committee, and so they're a stronger part of that process throughout, and so maybe that feels like it reduces the need for those feedback periods, which could condense the timeline. And then a few other considerations, but these would require changes to probably code. One is that 2 separate committee things where we do kind of an initial review committee and then we move to our writing committee. Some states do a public comment period to start with, and then they use those recommendations to make a decision on what the writing committee should go forward with. And some people, like I said, run those side by side. So that's a possibility. We take time to do appointments, and that kind of slows us down at the front end, where the House and Senate have an opportunity to appoint, but if they don't appoint within 30 days, then we come back and have the board appoint, and that just takes an extra month or so in there, depending on how they make those appointments. We could compress the public review windows. We're at 90 days, which is in our code, but most other states were 30, 45, even 60 days. I don't know if anybody else had 90.
No, I didn't see any 90s. I did notice that too.
They were pretty short. And then again, those board feedback points. So most other states had feedback at the end. I know why we put it in earlier, but we do have 2. And that just wasn't common in a lot of states. So there could just be other ways to consider doing that if it's being part of the writing committee or something like that. So those were just some thoughts on what you might want to do based on what we saw other states do.
Okay. Any comments that anybody has?
I just want to thank you for
Yeah.
the backup. All of the documents were so thorough and just fun to go through and see how we compare and what we're doing, and just thank you for your time.
I did think it was interesting that one state actually, I think it was Washington, they get to a point where they've approved the standards, kind of, and then they use them and then get feedback a year down the road and then continue to modify. And it was like, I'm not sure what to think of that. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe not. It just was, very different. We're going to use them and then we'll let you know. Yeah, but that's the hard thing, right? And that's a little tricky. And then those that every 5 years they redid, no matter what, you were on a schedule to revise. And so I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things there. Go ahead, Joanne.
Well, and I thought there were some states that get and maybe even mandate more parent feedback, where we have in our laws that Utah's, parents are the primary educator. There were states I saw like Georgia, Nebraska, and Rhode Island who have statewide surveys before they draft, and they ask for parent feedback, and others that have mandate that a parent be on committees for feedback. So I just wondered if maybe we could look at incorporating the family, a little more of the parents in the process. That I thought would be good. But yeah, thank you. It was really good to look at what the different states are doing and to be able to compare. So thank you for your work.
Okay, so what we're going to do, we're putting this on our agenda first, which may mean we're starting at 7 a.m. I'm not sure. Because next month we've got a pretty heavy lift, right? We've got probably a lot of rules coming that are. We have several. It'll be attendance. So I don't know, it'll be 7 o'clock, but just be aware of that. If you have any recommended motions or suggestions related to this, will you send those on to Megan so she can kind of have some ideas of where we might want to go or not? Maybe we don't want any changes, and that's fine too, maybe. And then we'll just put that on as an action item next month. And we could have it on still for a couple months, right? We could make some recommendations, get some feedback, and then complete it in June, because we may technically need to make some legislative changes depending on what we do, right? If we wanted to do more of that parent survey up front instead of a work group kind of a thing that provides recommendations and then on from there, or an open, maybe we gather, we have a 30-day initial public comment based on the current standards and recommendations. Some of them even put a research group together that was only in charge of overseeing research and submitting it to the working group. So that was an interesting thing too. So, bring your recommendations forward or submit them to Megan so she has some maybe things to work with. Yes?
On our core standards annual survey, who participates in that survey?
It is open. It could be anybody, but it's predominantly sent to educators because we utilize our education listservs and our CD feedback.
So from a parent perspective, they could offer through our core annual surveys, and we have the initial standards group or parent group that's convened right at the beginning before we do anything, and that's where the legislative delay comes in, right? Those 15 parents that are.
That's correct. So right now, we gather information through our queuing rubric, and as a part of the queuing rubric, we say, well, what are people's feelings on the standards currently? That survey has predominantly gone out to educators. I don't know that we've made a targeted effort towards getting parent feedback there, and we certainly could. But that feeds into that queuing rubric that gives us an idea, and every year that comes to you all and you say, yeah, it looks like it's time to review this set or not. We've moved away from that just because it's 2026, we're doing this standard.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion. A final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks for work. Appreciate it. Thanks, staff.